so I grew up in Japan until I was about 13 or so, Japanese mother and, American father. And so I think that the Japan side of the world kind of deeply influenced kind of all of the different things that I've done over the years. But then my professional career, I guess I was at Intel for 14 years. I was at the U.S. White House for a year under the previous administration. I got to clarify that nowadays. And then since then, I've kind of started a variety of different companies, sold some, but kept some. But the remote work world and distributed teams has always been a big part of that, as well as the future of work.
And why is that? Why has remote been something that's been, I suppose, a recurring theme for you?
Yeah, it really comes back to my time at Intel, where, Intel's an interesting company where, you basically have to dig a big hole in the ground, throw about $15 billion into it, and 5 years later, fingers crossed, hopefully you're right, right? So you spend a lot of time thinking about the future, and the products that I was working on was really all geared towards business. So we would do a bunch of, studies on how teams would work together and how people would interact with technologies, and therefore you'd see trends. And the first trend that, of course, is obvious now, but is that all, compute goes to the cloud. Okay, obvious. And then all software follows that, another obvious one. But the one that I think that is still emerging that people don't realize is that with all software being in the cloud, in reality, since your job is interacting with all of those pieces of software to get work done nowadays, that really your job then goes to the cloud. And then all of a sudden, when your job is in the cloud, things completely change from a work perspective, and how you think about productivity, how you think about how you assemble teams, and how you really go and drive things like culture and others. So it's really stemmed from that time at Intel that really kind of my passion around remote started.
And is that was, I guess, the inspiration for crossover as well? Because you started off with crossover. Well, you're known also as crossover for work. Is that right?
Yeah, it's crossover. I think the crossover, Twitter handle I think was taken. So I think that they put for work at the end of it just by life. But it's crossover.com, so it's crossover. It works.
Excellent. Well, tell us more about crossover, because it was one of those things. I mean, hiring is one of the biggest issues, I guess you could say, with any business. Most of all, I guess, remote business. There's big challenges when it comes to hiring, and from what I can see, crossover it seems to solve a lot of those issues. Could you tell us just a bit more about crossover to begin with as well?
Yeah, sure. So with crossover, what we basically do is we go around trying to find the best people from around the world, and everyone frickin' says that, so it sounds cliche, but here's the way that we basically do it, right? Is that we've got anywhere between 20 and 25,000 people a week apply to our various jobs, and then we test everyone, right? Because at the end of the day, if you look at the way that most people get their jobs, and they look at people's resumes, and if you look at the resume and you like it, you bring them in for an interview, and you interview them, and then you hire them, and all that is so outdated and archaic. Like literally, the resume, the format of the resume was invented by Leonardo da Vinci, believe it or not, 500 years ago,
A few
and
years
his
ago.
resume looked a little bit better than ours, granted, but it's still the same thing. It's like a list of accomplishments, whatever people want to put, right? It doesn't really tell you a whole lot. And then interviews are actually worse than a coin flip, in that, you have all these human biases that come in there on what school they went to, where they used to work, how they look, whatever it may be. So you're taking this 500-year-old artifact, and then you're putting it into this non-objective, non-structured model, and believing that you can get someone, and that's just wrong. Right. So what we do is we test everyone, and we think that for every single role, you could come up with very specific tests on, what that job is really going to be like, and what are the skills that are needed, and things like that, and kind of then objectively really understand who's really, really good at their job. And then you can interview them for things like cultural fit and things like that. Right. So that's what we do around the world. And I think, we then, we then assemble them into these cloud teams. And then we give them a bunch of tools to try to drive their productivity and what have you. And one big thing I think that's different about what we do is that we also have what I call a cloud wage. And what I mean by the cloud wage is that if you think about how wages are set today, right? They're hyper local. in that, what a Java developer makes in San Francisco is different than here in Austin, Texas, is different, in Rio de Janeiro, right? But they all could be doing the exact same job.
Of course.
Right? And particularly since they're doing it in the cloud. So you're like, why should they all make something different? So we pay the exact same no matter where in the world you are. So it's because we believe that you should get paid for, how good you are, not where you live. And therefore we have these these cloud wages, which are horizontal anywhere around the world. So it doesn't matter if you're in Romania, if you qualify for one of our SVP positions, you're making $400,000 a year. It doesn't matter that you're in Romania and you're literally like $4,000 is completely different than the wage rates in Romania, of course, but that's what you're worth, right, to the companies and what have you, to my company. So that's what you should get paid. So those are the fundamental differences, I think, and it's all 40-hour a week, long-term positions, careers, the whole 9 yards. We believe that is the future of work.
No, I love that idea of getting paid based on what you bring to the table, because like you said, it doesn't matter where you may be. You could be just as good, if not better, than anybody else. So I love that. I love that idea, and I think that's one of the things that really sort of compelled me to want to speak to you to find out more about your ideas behind that. And of course, you've assembled your own team as well, your own remote. You're a remote first team, right? Is that right?
All remote. Everything I do is remote across all of my companies, and I actually, so we've got thousands of people across my various companies now that are in 130 different countries, and every single time I buy a company, I basically staff that up with all remote teams, because magic happens when you can get these amazing people from around the world to be infuse them into these companies. Like literally, magic happens.
No, it's amazing. And I mean, I guess, like you said, you've got different teams, but what's the general makeup of your team with Crossover? What different departments do you have? And is it just typical of a SaaS remote business, or anything different?
Yeah, so think about in two different lines. So there's the team that I have that actually operates Crossover itself, right? Which is kind of your sourcing teams, your testing teams, your engineering teams, and your support teams, and all that other good jazz, right? But then and that is a relatively modest set of people. But the bigger part of my team is actually using all of that talent that comes in to then buy these various other SaaS companies and infuse them into those companies. And in those companies, we've got everything, all of the various types of teams that you can imagine, everything, not only your typical engineering teams and what have you and support, but we do inside sales via remote. We do marketing via remote. We do finance and accounting via remote. Every single type of team that you need to run a SaaS company, we staff up across all of these various companies that I buy.
It's amazing. I was amazed at the portfolio that you have, and it's all obviously interconnected into, as you've just explain. What challenges, what are the biggest challenges for you that you've had to overcome with, not just with Crossover, but just with amalgamating, such a portfolio?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's challenges that we face across the board, of course. But I have to say that figuring out how to do a lot of these functions remote was a big part of it. Right, because obviously the way that you manage a remote team is just fundamentally different than the way that you manage a local team. And therefore, when you start thinking about how you actually manage and coach those individuals, you have to then say, what are the assets that I now have because they are doing work in the cloud, and how do I leverage those? And for example, one thing that you lack is that they're not down your hall, right? So you can't just walk around.
Sure.
But what you do have is that they are, producing, we all produce about 2 terabytes of data a year when we're working, banging away, what applications of foreground, background, who I'm collaborating with, and things like that. And then, so we're like, great, how do we gather all that data to be able to provide real-time coaching to people? Right, where if you think about the notion of lead and lag metrics, where the lag metric is like, did I lose my 5 pounds that I was trying to lose, right? But if you just wait to step on the scale, 2 weeks later you're like, oh, I either lost it or I didn't lose it, right? You need a lead metric, which is like like a Fitbit, right? Which is like, did I take my 10,000 steps today or not? Right. And people look down and they're like, oh, I didn't do it. So I'm going to walk up the stairs. Right. And that's a lead metric that then leads to the outcome or the lag metric that you want. Right. So in the cloud world, we had to figure out what are these lead metrics that matter that we can give people the coaching and provide these data points to then lead to the results that we want. So figuring all that was really, really important. I'd say that the second really, really important thing was how you actually develop culture remotely. Right. Because at the end of the day, these are your teams. These are, this is the folks that are, in battle with you. You gotta believe what you believe together, and you gotta build this culture. And it's different when, than, when you can't go out and grab a pint together necessarily very easily. Although I still still tell people, hey, just because you're remote doesn't mean that airplanes don't work. You should still get together every once in a while. But like how you build culture remotely. And I just bought this company called Sococo, which is like one of the most exciting companies that I've bought in a long time, because it focuses on this remote culture element of it, and it really kind of gives you a visual overlay of your floor, and as if people were kind of sitting there together, and I'm excited for that.
No, it sounds like there's lots of exciting things. I could probably get this podcast to go for 2 hours, let alone 30 minutes with all the questions that are springing into my head. But no, I'm fascinated because you mentioned you were talking about the Fitbit. You're giving the Fitbit sort of analogy there. Tell us more then about, because you've developed this tool which is kind of like the Fitbit for work and productivity. Can you tell us more about that? And I mean, there's lots of them out there on the market, but how is WorkSmart different? What can it bring?
Sure. Yeah, so WorkSmart is probably my worst marketed product of all time right now. But what we're trying to do is really do exactly what I was mentioning, right? Which is like, how do we measure all these various things to be able to provide people real-time coaching on the spot? Because I believe that, again, getting that lead metric really, really matters in people's hands. But then I also believe that the manager of the future is really a bot. Right, where it like tells you, right, what you're actually doing well. Here's the way you're working versus other people, and just that might be okay, but these are the top performers over here. You sure you don't want to do it like this, right? So like giving people this level of coaching based on real data, because I think back towards most of my reviews that I've either done or even when I was Intel or others, and they're super data light. Right, you're like, you meet with someone once a quarter or once a year, and like, here's 3 things you did well and 3 things you need to get improvement on. And you're like, there's no data, there's no anything, right? It's like the manager like wrote it like 3 minutes before the meeting, right?
Exactly.
But like, this is like real data, right? Where you're banging away, you're working, like who you're working with, how are you working, like when are you most productive, like how do we think about your team like athletes? Right, where like all the best athletes in the world, right? You think about your golf swing or whatever, you're measuring your angle of attack, or if you're a soccer player, you're measuring the compression on the golf ball on the soccer ball. If you're a basketball player, you're measuring your arc, like all these things that you're measuring, right? And then you're giving it back to the athlete and saying, hey, change this or change that, and making them better. But we don't do that on the business side. We don't do that on the work side. And you're like, why not? Right? So that's what we're trying to go build, right? Is like measure everything to try to run regressions against that to help people to get better and better and better. And if we get good at that, then with the individuals will get better. But not only will the individuals get better, we'll then be able to then go further back in the recruiting cycle and say, well, what is it about this individual then in how they work and how they're great and what their background was and how they did on the various tests. And then can we then statistically tell you when you apply, they like, hey, Alex, I think that, you're applying for this role here, but you have a 90% chance to be a top performer in this role. Mm-hmm. You sure you don't want to apply for this one instead? Right? And to be able to give that type of guidance to people as they apply, or even reach out to people. Right? Be like, oh my God, like you are the 99% fit for this role. You got to come apply, right? Like, so all those things, we want this circular motion to occur, but it comes from measuring that data. And the good news is that we're measuring a lot of it, but now we're still trying to figure out the correlations and all that. And we got a long way to go there.
Well, we're keeping an eye on that, because productivity is like it's a massive talking point in not just in the world of work, but remote work in particular, because that. Because when you're, I suppose, disseminated over such a wide space, you as a manager, you have to have, like you said, those data points to understand where you can make improvements, to understand where the holes are. So, no, that sounds good to me.
Exactly, because unfortunately, and the reason why most managers still don't do remote is they don't trust it. right? They're like, is that person really working or not? Are they really on the golf course somewhere? Right. So like the good news is that with this data model, and you can, it also provides trust in a scalable way because you can see them working, you can see the data points, you can see the intensity, right? You can see who they're collaborating with and things like that. And as a manager, then you're like, great, I can now, look across my 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people, and even though they're all remote, I know that they're being productive, and I have even more data on them than the random person that's just sitting in the cubicle down the hall or whatever else it may be. So I believe that this will become the norm, and I believe that this is actually the way that it's a scalable remote future versus today. It's these tiny little pocket niches today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, and I think another thing, I suppose, which is obviously related to this, we're talking about obviously recruiting and finding the best people and making things a bit more efficient. A lot of managers that I speak to, CEOs, etc., talk about the volume of applicants that they get for each role, in particular remote roles. Obviously, remote work is a very popular thing. It's very en vogue at the moment, but they always get a sort of a swathe of applicants to different roles, and that testing at the top of the funnel sort of thing, and not just the top of the funnel, but it throughout the whole process is really important. How could you've developed, I suppose, custom testing tools, haven't you, to sort of make this easier? Can you tell us more about those?
Yeah, no. So we use a combination of both custom tools as well as I would consider to be kind of industry standard. And so we look at any given role and we say, what are the key important characteristics of that role, from everything from a cognitive capability to the level of English capability to the specifics of that role itself, right? I'll give you an example. Like my executive assistant is a good example, because like everyone, you can kind of visualize that for like software developers and making them code and analyzing their code and things like that. But I like to kind of use examples that are a little bit different in that, like my EA, right? I'm like, okay, what are the important characteristics of EA? Oh, yeah, sure. I want you to be smart. She needs to communicate well. But then, like, she also, because I travel all over the place, right? She needs to be an expert at travel, right? She needs to be an expert at like the multiple time zones, right? Since we're doing meetings in multiple time zones. And then she also needs to be able to be an expert at like expense reports and stuff like that. Like, it seems like those are three things that are reasonable for the people to be experts on, right? So we developed a test that would test all three of those, right? And we had 421 people apply, I think, for that given role, and we gave them all this test, right? And like the travel one was like, hey, I'm flying from Austin to Chicago to Dubai, right? And then here are a bunch of different airline options and prices, and which is the best one. And there's multiple good answers, but then this one has too tight of a connection through O'Hare or whatever else it may be. So you can really kind of see who does it, or like the time zone one. You're like, hey, here are 5 people, they all have to meet at UTC time. You like do the conversion and multiple choice, right? And you can go do that. Or the expense report one was really good in that it was like, here are 10 different receipts, and here's 50 different exchange rates. Translate them into an expense report, and then also separate what's business versus personal, and then give me an answer in US dollars, right? And you have to do the conversions and see what a whole 9 yards. And you run like hundreds of people through these tests, right? Cognitive tests, English tests, and those tests. And the people you get at the end of it are awesome. That they're really, really good at their job, and then you interview them. Right. And then obviously EA, because I interact with them all the time, like you want to make sure that you get along with them and stuff like that. Right. So like you could envision these types of tests, and a lot of them, we do automated in manner, and therefore it really weeds out the people and really brings out the people that are really, really the best in their trait. And then you can go look for the soft stuff. So we do that across the board. And again, I said that we've got anywhere between 20 and 25,000 people a week that apply for a job. So we got to get good at these.
That is a lot. That's a big number. Oh my gosh. And talking about the soft skills, I mean, how do you recommend then? Can you? I don't know if you can really test for soft skills, because people can change their behaviors, can't they? So I don't know. What's your view on testing for soft skills?
Yeah, so I kind of I divide soft skills kind of into 3 different categories, right? One is kind of just a soft skill of communication, right? Like communication quality you can test, because sometimes like in a sales role you want a 5 out of 5 out of English, but maybe for a developer role you're like 3 out of 5. So you can kind of test for English quality there, right? You have them do a recording and things like that. We also give some personality tests, and we look for conscientiousness and some other characteristics that we've known to be relevant for certain types of roles like support and what have you. But then on the last one, yeah, I mean, you really kind of you do have to look for the type of role that it is and understand whether or not they've got the right demeanor for that type of a role. But in all scenarios, you want people that have a bit more of a growth mentality, right? Or you want people to be like, no, absolutely, like they can take coaching and they can be like, great, I want to get better, and they can, and move on. And those are the types of people that I look for, is the people that that can really be like, what? No, give me the feedback, right? I want the direct feedback. I want radical candor so I can get better, because I can strive and continue to get better because I have this growth mentality. And it's been harder to test for that. But certainly the way that when you talk to folks, you can kind of feel that. And I'd love to make it all objective at some point. But, I think that, each of these soft skills, we got to get better and better at our testing.
No, definitely. I like that. I like it. Radical candor. Yes, I'm a fan of that myself. And obviously, when you're doing your searches, you're searching. I think the beauty of remote work and hiring in remote work is that it's like you have access to people from all over the world to do whichever role that you want, but that can obviously bring its challenges as well. Am I right in saying you search for candidates across nearly 100 countries?
Yeah, even more so, actually. We actually have people today in 130 different countries, but we search even broader than that, because we're a big believer that the wider that you search, the better and better talent that you can get.
Yeah.
Right. The analogy I give often is a football analogy, right? Where, I'm here in Austin, Texas. There's 2 million people or so in the greater Austin area. If I were to assemble a football team here, it'd be a decent team. There's 2 million people to choose from, right? But if I expand my denominator to all of the United States, right, and 350 million people in the United States, and I assembled a team, rest assured my U.S. team is going to be my Austin team, right? And then if I were to expand the denominator again to the 7 billion people in the world, like, though controversial in the U.S., like my global football team is going to beat my U.S. team, and without a doubt. There's no doubt that my global best team is going to beat my Austin team. Like people will look at that and be like, there's obviously no comparison. But yet when people assemble companies and their team, right, you're like, oh, but I only want to choose the people in Austin or my zip code, right? You're like, what are you doing, right? Like you don't want to compete. You don't want the global team. Like what? You don't want that, right? So we're like, guys, like go everywhere. And like the one thing that I've learned, over the last 15 years doing distributed and remote teams is that there are amazing people freaking everywhere, and it's awesome. And it's inspiring to see, man. No matter where I land, I meet with people and chat with them, and it's such amazing, inspiring stories. And I'm like, I'm so happy that I got the honor to meet you, right? And like, there are everywhere. And unfortunately, 70% of the people in the U.S. they don't even have a passport, right? They've never gone anywhere, right? So like,
is it 70%?
70%, right?
Wow.
So like, it's crazy town, right? So you're like there are great people everywhere. So like and that's why I'm like trying to buy as many companies as possible now, because I'm like, guys, what a great competitive advantage. If I can figure out how to leverage all this great talent and buy these companies and infuse them, magic can happen, right? So I'm like, man, like just back up the truck. Like if I could continue to find all the great people around the world, and if I can like assemble the top 1% of talent for anywhere around the world, like how much are you willing to pay to have the world's best team and whatever, right? Like it's infinite, right? So.
No, it's a great thing, and I think, like I said, remote brings so much opportunity. It's amazing that there are still people out there who, I know there's obviously, again, lots of things that can be improved, and that same can be said about co-located business, but there's so much opportunity that, this is why I started the podcast, because I wanted to sort of shine a light on all the people like yourself, Andy, who are sort of giving us this opportunity to sort of make it work. So, no, thank you.
Yeah, no. I mean, it takes awareness, and I appreciate you starting a podcast like this, because it is awareness, because it's still, young, and there's been starts and stops, right? It's been this sine wave over time where, in the late 90s it was on this big boom, and then, Marissa Meyer and others, it took a big dip in the early 2000s, and now it's kind of coming back. But now more than ever, I think we now have the right capabilities to do that, right? Where, it used to be that, you go to places of the world and then like dial-up modem at best, right? I mean, there wasn't a big internet pipe, but now there's big internet pipes everywhere, even wireless. You've got these great, remote collaboration tools. You've got these, great culture building tools like Sococo. You've got all these, great project management tools that you could do in the cloud. So we're now to that point where you can actually do a lot of these things, and it might have been a little premature before. So I can understand why it failed, but we have to do it in a scalable way, right? It can't be this like little niche things, and therefore, hard questions like trust matter, right? Mm-hmm. Because not everyone in the world is trustworthy, right? So you gotta you gotta make sure that you protect your enterprise, right? So what can you do to actually go and do all that are the things that I think that is the next evolution of remote that I'm super excited to see evolution on.
And talking about evolution, what's in the pipeline for crossover in the next 6 to 12 months? Have you planned beyond the next 12 months? I don't know.
Yeah, no. So we are going to continue to buy, as part of my Think 3 fund, we're going to continue to buy as many companies as humanly possible, right? And we're going to staff them with great remote teams from around the world. And literally, I view that as a big part of my competitive advantage on buying these companies is that I now know how to source and assemble these great teams and manage these great teams and put them into these companies. And it dramatically changes the trajectory of these companies when you just infuse it with better and better people, right? So I view that, and I'm sure there will be other private equity firms that spring up that will end up doing the same thing. But I believe that to be the absolute future of, not only PE, but certainly VC and startups too. So, so we're just going to continue to buy companies like crazy. We're trying to go from I think we bought 30 companies last year or this year. We're trying to go to one a week next year, and then we're trying to go to one a day by 2021.
Wow. Well, one thing's for sure, I'll be keeping an eye out, Andy, to see where things are going. And where are you at the moment? Where are you situated right now?
Yeah, I'm in Austin, Texas. It is a cold front coming through here, so I'm freezing my rear end off here in Austin, Texas. But it's a great city, great food scene, great music scene, great tech scene here.
Excellent, sounds good. Well, Andy, it's been eye-opening. It's been interesting. It's been lovely speaking to you. As I said, I'll be keeping an eye on what you are doing and your aims to sort of buy one company. Was it per month or per day? Was it per month?
By next year we're going to do one a week, and then we're going to do one a day by 2021.
That's amazing. Well, I'll be keeping an eye out for that. Thank you for joining us, Andy, and I wish you all the best with your ventures and with crossover. And if anybody, I'll leave the details in the show notes. But if you're hiring right now, or if you're looking to hire in the future, then you should get over to crossover.com. and check it out, because there are challenges involved in recruiting, and I think really crossover is a real solution that you should consider in your hiring. So thanks again, Andy.
And have anyone want to reach out to me, feel free. I mean, my Twitter handle, of course, is just @AndyTryba. So feel free to reach out, and and thank you again for the time here. It's always fun to chat with other passionate remote folks.
Excellent. I'll put your Twitter handle in the show notes as well, so people can reach out to you. Thanks, Andy.
Great. All right.